Hey guys, welcome to Little Blackbird 91. We're giving you guys a video talking about, why men fear change and the unknown. Yes, this is where we talk to you guys about therapy, my therapy sessions, and some of the things that I discussed with my therapist. And one of the topics we discussed was the fear of change and the unknown. I actually couldn't figure out the origin point for myself in this instance, so we're going to slightly do this a little bit different than we usually do. And so we're going to go about it a different way than usual. But as always, this particular video is sponsored by BetterHelp. If you're somebody out there who's been needing who's been thinking about therapy and getting a therapist, then BetterHelp is here to help. Make sure you guys use the link down below in the description box. It has LB91 and it will get 10% off your particular sessions for a limited time only. Look, I want to be very real and honest about this and frank. We kind of spoke about this a little bit when we spoke about the fear of failure. But today's topic we're talking about is the fear of the change and the unknown, okay? So one might ask, what is change and what is the unknown? So to change means to be different or to alter or to modify. And to have, obviously, the unknown is to talk about the unknown. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what's out there. You don't know what's next. It's black, it's bleak, you're ignorant, you're not sure of what's going to happen or what is out there in some sense of the word, right? And there are real fears and there are real disorders that actually happen. But we're talking more about the daily problems that come along with having some type of anxiety or having some type of feeling of stress when it comes to not necessarily knowing the unknown or knowing that change is coming, right? And what to do when change is coming. Why is that men fear this? And of course, this is also for women as well, but we are talking from a male perspective today. So please, before we do anything further, make sure you guys like, share, subscribe, click on that bell button. Today, we're going to help you guys have a conversation and solve the issue around, I guess, why men fear change and the unknown. And for those of you who are returnees, we want you guys to know that you got the minerals, okay? All right, don't play with it, don't play with it, don't play with it, don't play with it. As I said, I don't really have an origin point. Usually how I do this is I talk about the origin point, I talk about behavior, I talk about the results, and I talk about the problems that arise with it. So rather I have more of a story, okay? Maybe I should say the first time I realized I didn't like change, right? The change aspect for me personally, because this is me talking about personally, was I had a problem with letting go. And the reason why I had a problem with letting go was because, one, if I had to let go, I felt like I was questioning my own particular value. The problem with change is that once change comes into play, value begins to change. We've already discussed this from last week, where if you don't already have a good solidified foundation about how you're valued or what you should be valued for, when change comes in, you are going to question whether your value is also going to change. For instance, if you're at work, right, and you know your value, you know your worth. Now, change may come and you may not have the same job you were supposed to have, but you know your value and you know where to go, you know where to go and know where to place yourself because you understand your value. But for those who don't really fully grasp their value, are not sure of what their value is, when change comes in, they start to question, what is my value? It's an internalized battle that one will face, right? You start looking at yourself and questioning what you bring to the quote unquote essential table, whether that's a relationship, whether that's work, whether that is with friends, whether that's with family, whether that's life circumstances. We start questioning our value, especially when we don't have a certified foundation when it comes to value. So let me go back a little bit, right? As a child, you're supposed to be installed with value. You're supposed to be installed with value of being who you are, not necessarily by what you do. You're supposed to be defined by who you are. We are the Ampardus. That's my surname, Ampadu. We are the Ampardus. And the Ampardus, and you'll see that your name or your family kind of ethos is often embedded in some of those values. Like, this is who we are, right? but there's a greater sense of being admonished and being how should I say, yeah, being admonished and being spoken to and being uplifted and encouraged to be loved and valued for who you are. This is where the problems all start for most of us who fear change and the unknown. When you're not valued at a young age, your childhood stages, right? Your infantiles, when you're not being, how do I say? There's a word I'm looking for, but there's what I'm looking for. But when you're not, I'll just use the word admonish. When you're not being admonished from a young age and being let know, because this is who you are, and we're proud of who you are. You have value just being my child. You have value just being my son. You have value just being my daughter. You have value just being you. Then when change comes, you question you. You internalize it because you've never been admonished for who you actually are. And so what happens then is that when change comes, or when the unknown is presented, the value is questioned, because very much so, we don't know what's going to happen next. And you're not sure because you were never sure of who you actually were, which is really hard, right? For anybody to deal with, to be in a position where you're never really sure of who you actually are. And so now when change is presented to you, many other fears are now elicited from that particular change. What will I do? What will I become? How will I get there? Will that mean that I'm no longer valuable? Will that mean that I'm no longer needed? Will that mean that I'm no longer, wanted? You have a bunch of questions around that aspect simply because change has come, right? So let's talk a little bit about maybe relationships, because I can tell you about that myself, right? Change is hard for me. So I've sometimes being in a relationship, I stay longer than I need to, right? I've stayed in I remember when one of my relationships where God was telling me, go, just go. And I'm like, no, I'm not going, right? And the reason why I didn't want to go, and the reason why I was afraid of going, is because I was afraid of what my value would actually be, right? I was afraid of what my actual value would be. I was questioning, hold on a minute. If I let go now and there's a change coming, who will value me the way that I feel like I want to be valued? Who will care for me? Who will love me? Who will appreciate me? But actually, all underneath that, it's who's going to value me the way that I want to be valued. And that person value me the same way that I want to see myself being valued, that I see myself now being valued at. Sometimes you're actually devaluing yourself in that current moment, and you need to see yourself in the new light. But irrespective, the change that's coming makes you fear whether you're going to be valued or not. And a lot of times, and of course, everybody goes through this, by the way, that aspect, everybody goes through a questioning. But many of us stay longer in situations because, and I've done, like I said, I've done this with myself, we stay longer because we're afraid of asking that question, what's my value going to be at the end of this? We should really take an approach that says, you know what, my value is going to increase when I leave. But the fear of that change makes us feel like if I leave, then my value will actually drop, which is kind of hard to process until you really do the backward work and really understand what's going on. And I know I'm preaching to the choir because I need this word for myself. So that change then becomes synonymous with bad things. Whenever you hear the word or see the word of change, it becomes synonymous with bad things. Bad things are going to happen. So therefore, in this scenario, in this situation, all that's going to happen is when change comes, you're going to associate it with it's going to be bad. And again, that goes back to what we feel about our value. When we feel our value as a positive net and we have a good experience of our value, when we see change, we actually welcome the change because, like, you know what? Okay, I see changes coming, I see changes happening, but you know what's going to happen? I'm going to work it out. I'm going to move through this. I'm going to survive. I'm going to thrive through this because actually, well and truly, I know my value and what I bring. I remember being at work at points in time, And they might bring a new product or a new service. And I'm like, why are they changing it? What? It ain't broken. Why are you changing it? And it's because I would have to learn a new skill. I would have to learn a new script. I would have to associate with customers in a completely new way. And again, all that came down to was I was afraid my value would change. What I knew how to do already meant that I knew where my value was at. But because I didn't have a very good understanding of my value of who I was, when change is presented to me at work, what I was afraid of was if I don't value, if I move, if they change the product or the service, my value also goes with that product or service, but your value is intact. It doesn't go with the product or the service. It doesn't go with that relationship, right? But not all of us have that thought process. It's very difficult. I can't lie to you. It is hard, right? There are so many fears that come along with the unknown. Fear of incompetence. There's a shame. There's a fear of you're going to be embarrassed. There's a fear that you won't be able to pick up the new skills. There's a fear that you won't be as good. There's a fear of failing. There's a fear of not knowing enough, etc. There are so many fears that come along with change and that come along with also the unknown as well, which makes a lot of sense. But I want to reiterate that point. Your value isn't changing, or should I say rather, the value of being who you are isn't going to change. If your value is simply placed on what you do, then yeah, your value will change. If your value is simply placed on what you do, then your value will change. But if your value is according to who you are, then it doesn't change with the scenario, right? It doesn't change with the unknown because who you are quintessentially doesn't change. And so that's what you have to get to. And I think that's even hard for me at times because sometimes I know what my value is as a person, but sometimes I put my value in what I do, right? And something I was talking to God about earlier this week was finding my way back into, for instance, YouTube and going, what is my why, right? Like, for instance, this video right now, we have 17 people on the live, 17. It's not your 100, it's not your 200, it's not your 600, it's not your 800 that we normally have on a live. We have 17 people on this live. And my thought process is, what's the point of doing this live? What's the point of doing this particular live right now? If only 17 people, maybe 5 people on Instagram and 2 people on Twitter are watching it, what's the point? Right? Well, the reality is I have to go back to my why and understand who I am. Quintessentially, my why was to always help people. Doesn't matter if it was 1, 10, 30, 100, 2,000 people. My why was always to help people. Quintessentially, I'm a servant, right? How God created me to be was to be a servant and a child of God, right? So for me, my value is in the fact that God has called me. I want to call it my calling, as one might say. This is 2 Corinthians 5. I don't want to preach. Let me not go too deep. I don't want to preach. But 2 Corinthians 5 it talks about how, our ministry of reconciliation, right? Our ministry of reconciliation. Whilst we talk about our purpose, as in God has given us a purpose to worship him, but we then have a calling. And your calling is a ministry of reconciliation. How do I reconcile people back onto God? Some of us do it for our jobs. Some of us do it for our careers. Some of us do it through YouTube. Some of us do it at the church. Some of us do it wherever we are, right? But quintessentially, my value is that I'm a son of God. That doesn't change, right? That doesn't move. That doesn't shift. That is built on a solid rock. That is built on something that won't move or shift with the times or the current season or the culture. That's where my value is. That can't be moved. So if I build my value upon that, it doesn't matter what change happens. Ooh, I'm preaching to myself. I know I am. Listen, it doesn't matter what change happens or what unknown is next, because quintessentially, I'm always going to be a child of God. I'm always going to be his son. I'm always going to be who I am. And so my value doesn't change with a scenario or a situation, whether I'm bad, whether I'm good, whether I'm up, whether I'm down, whether it's going right, whether it's going wrong, whether it's swirling around me, whether there's a storm, whether there is sun or sea, or whether there is rain, whether there is, a rainbow, whatever you want to call it, whatever the situation is, my value doesn't change. So actually, I have to welcome change because it's an opportunity to learn more about myself. It's an opportunity for endurance. It's an opportunity for stamina. It's an opportunity for patience. It's an opportunity for growth as character, as personhood, right? So for me personally now, and one of the things that I struggled with, I was really looking at it and I was asking myself, like, brother, this is tough, you know? Like, I'm looking at the situation, I'm looking at things that are changing in my life, and I'm like, things are beginning to shift. Like, we go through periods and patches where things are very consistent and things are very plateau. You're in your life where things are just going real easy. It's okay to be in that situation, right? Because things have a consistency and a pattern, and you know exactly what's going to happen. If I do this, it does that, right? And so you kind of know how to get certain outcomes. What happens when change hits is that the inputs need to change, and the outputs are often going to change too, right? And we have to learn it all over again, and that's the difficulty of that cycle. And so we have to be okay with change because it's inevitable. But not only just be okay with change, you've got to know your value. And so for me personally, I put my value in God. That's just me. Nothing else for me makes sense. So if I can put my value in God, I know that doesn't change because he doesn't change how he sees me. And that's built upon a solid foundation. Therefore, just like when Peter was walking across the water, no matter what storm comes my way, no matter what change or unknown situation happens, for me personally, I can still have faith that my value is intact. Well, I don't want to go much further. Like I said, I wanted to, keep it nice and short. And I wasn't here to preach, but I wanted to give a little of a conversation about the fear of change and unknown. Don't be afraid of the change and don't be afraid of the unknown. Let me quickly touch on the unknown. Change is slightly different to the unknown. The unknown sometimes, of course, involves some level of change, but it also involves a level of ignorance. We don't know what's happening, right? We don't know what's happening, right? So when you're unknown in a situation, when it's unknown, the fear is that I don't know what I'm going into. I can't see ahead of me. And this is where, again, I don't want to preach too much again, but they say we walk by faith and not by sight. If I was walking by sight, there would be things I would walk into that I shouldn't walk into, and things that I wouldn't walk into that I should walk into. And so the unknown presents, again, another opportunity to be grounded in some certain truths. If I know my value, when I'm walking into the unknown, I know that my values at the core aren't changing. So irrespective of whether I'm shrouded by darkness, I still have light in me. And in fact, the Bible tells us that, the darkness could not comprehend the light, right? So even with the ignorance of not knowing what's happening next, of the unknown, I have a light in me, a knowledge of me, a knowing of my value, right? A revelation of myself, of the God in me. I'm not talking about Jesus, by the way, so not the God in me, someone else's relation, right? I know my value. So when I go into the unknown, even though I may be shrouded in darkness, I have light in me. And so therefore, when I walk into it, I can walk into it in confidence, even though I may not know what's next. I can trust. And that's a very difficult thing, because that's another conversation we should talk about, trust. And that's another video we'll do maybe next week, okay? So I'm going to leave it there. Guys. I hope you guys have been blessed and you've got something from this. But we're going to leave it there. The fear of the unknown and change. But I would love to talk about trust another time, because I think it will definitely speak volumes. Again, this video is sponsored by BetterHelp. So please, if you do want to help yourself be better, then go to BetterHelp. They have a therapist on hand. And if you use the LBB91, you can get 10% off your next few sessions as well. So if you've been thinking about it of late, this is your confirmation. This is your, your sign. Go ahead, sign up and get yourself some help. I've signed up myself, so I'm actually there and doing the last 5 sessions or 6 sessions is what has built this particular conversation we have every week as well. All right, so make sure you guys like, share, subscribe, click on that bell button for notification uploads. We appreciate you guys. Stay locked and stay loaded. We'll see you again soon. Much love. Level black, you know